The Galactic Command Station orbited the gas giant Kepler 442b like a massive steel flower, its rotating sections catching starlight from 3 different suns. Admiral Veltar stood at the observation deck, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he watched human ships dock at the outer ring. The Zephyrian's blue skin seemed to shimmer with barely contained irritation. "They send us children," he muttered to his aide, Lieutenant Kexra. "Look at them. Smooth skin, small frames, barely any natural weapons. How did these creatures ever survive their home world?" Kexra, a fellow Zephyrian with the characteristic head tentacles that marked his lower rank, shifted nervously. "The reports say they have been quite effective, Admiral. Perhaps we should not judge by appearance alone." Veltar's laugh was like grinding metal. "Effective? They have been fighting pirates and rogue traders. Child's play. Tomorrow we face the Crimson Horde. These humans will break like twigs when they see what real warfare looks like." The massive bay doors hissed open as the human delegation approached. Admiral Veltar had been expecting someone imposing, someone who looked like the legendary warriors from Zephyrian myths. Instead, he saw a woman who barely reached his shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and her brown eyes met his without fear, but also without the proper deference he expected from inferior species. "Admiral Veltar," she said, extending her hand in the strange human gesture. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. Thank you for allowing us to join this operation." Veltar looked down at the offered hand, but did not take it. "Commander Chen, I must admit, I was expecting someone more substantial. The Crimson Horde has devastated 17 systems. Their ships are the size of small moons, and their warriors stand 3 meters tall. Are you certain your people can handle such opposition?" Sarah's smile never wavered. "We're here to help, Admiral. My team has experience with asymmetric warfare. Sometimes size isn't the determining factor in combat." "Asymmetric warfare," Veltar repeated, tasting the unfamiliar phrase. "You mean fighting those weaker than yourself?" "Not exactly," Sarah said. "It means using strategy and intelligence when you're outmatched in raw power." Lieutenant Kexra stepped forward. "Commander, if I may ask, what is your combat experience?" Admiral Veltar has led victorious campaigns across 47 systems. Sarah's expression remained polite. "I've been in the service for 12 years. I've seen my share of action." Veltar's tentacles twitched with amusement. "Your share of action? Against pirates, I assume? Smugglers? The galaxy is vast, little human, and the enemies we face tomorrow have technology that makes your ships look like children's toys." The briefing room was enormous, designed to accommodate the various species of the Galactic Alliance. Representatives from 6 different worlds sat around the holographic display that showed the Crimson Horde's latest position. The enemy fleet looked like a swarm of angry insects, each ship bristling with weapons that could crack planets. "The situation is dire," Admiral Veltar announced to the assembly. "The Horde has broken through our outer defenses faster than our projections indicated. They will reach the Altair system in 72 hours. If Altair falls, they will have a clear path to the inner colonies." General Thokran of the Brutari Empire slammed his massive fist on the table. "Then we fight them head-on. Brutari warriors do not know retreat. And that is why you lost 4 fleets to them already," observed Captain Silwen of the Ethereal Collective, her translucent form shimmering with disapproval. Sarah studied the holographic display, her fingers tracing patterns in the air as she manipulated the data. "What's their standard attack formation?" "Standard?" Veltar's voice carried a note of condescension. "Child, there is nothing standard about the Crimson Horde. They attack like a plague of locusts, overwhelming everything in their path." "But they must have some pattern," Sarah insisted. "Every military force develops habits, especially successful ones. They stick with what works." Admiral Veltar activated a different section of the display. "Very well. They form a sphere formation with their largest dreadnoughts at the center and smaller vessels creating multiple protective layers. They advance slowly, crushing everything in their path with overwhelming firepower. How long do they maintain formation during an engagement? What does it matter? General Thakran growled. Strong formation or weak formation, we must meet them with honor. Sarah ignored the Brutari general and focused on Veltar. How long, Admiral? Until victory is assured. Their discipline is absolute. Veltar's tone suggested he found her questions tiresome. And their communication systems? Quantum entanglement networks. Instantaneous communication across their entire fleet. Why these questions, human? Do you think you have discovered some weakness that our greatest military minds have missed? Sarah leaned back in her chair. I might have some ideas, but I'd need to see more detailed reconnaissance data. The room fell silent. Captain Silwen's form flickered with what might have been surprise. Commander, are you suggesting you can find a tactical solution that has eluded the combined intelligence of 6 species? I'm suggesting that different perspectives can be valuable, Sarah replied diplomatically. Admiral Veltar's forearms spread wide in a gesture of disbelief. Perspectives. Commander Chen, the Crimson Horde has conquered civilizations that had thousands of years to develop their military doctrines. What could your species, barely 50 years into space travel, possibly offer? Sarah stood up slowly. Admiral, with respect, you're judging us based on assumptions. You see small humans and assume weakness, but my people didn't reach the stars by being weak. Your people reached the stars because of luck and the generosity of the Galactic Alliance, Veltar replied coldly. Do not mistake charity for achievement. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Sarah's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. I see. Well, I suppose actions speak louder than words. Indeed they do, Veltar said, which is why I am assigning your small fleet to the rear guard. You can observe how real warriors conduct themselves in battle. The rear guard? Sarah's eyes flashed. Admiral, my people didn't come here to watch from the sidelines. Your people came here because your government begged for the chance to prove your worthiness for continued alliance membership, Veltar said bluntly. I am ensuring you survive long enough to report back that you tried. General Thakran laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together. The human shows spirit, Admiral. Perhaps we should let them charge with the first wave. It would be a glorious death. No, Veltar said firmly. I will not have their destruction on my conscience. They will stay in the rear where they belong. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. And what if I refuse those orders? The room went dead quiet. Challenging a Galactic Alliance admiral was tantamount to mutiny. Veltar's blue skin darkened to almost purple with anger. You would refuse a direct order? I would request clarification of my fleet's role in this operation, Sarah said carefully. My government sent me here with specific instructions to contribute meaningfully to the defense effort. Your contribution will be staying alive so your species maintains representation in the Alliance, Veltar said through gritted teeth. That is meaningful enough. Sarah took a deep breath. Admiral, I think you're making a mistake. My people... Your people, Veltar interrupted, rising to his full height, are soft, weak creatures who have never faced real adversity. Look at you. You have no natural armor, no claws, no fangs. You cannot fly, you cannot breathe in vacuum. You cannot survive in any environment without artificial support. What possible advantage could you offer against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations? The other representatives watched this exchange with fascination. It was rare to see a subordinate challenge a Zephyrian admiral so directly. Sarah stood silent for a moment, then reached for the bottom edge of her uniform shirt. Admiral, you want to know what advantage humans offer? Before anyone could react, she lifted her shirt, revealing her torso to just below her chest. The room gasped collectively. Her ribcage was a map of scars, long, jagged marks that spoke of terrible trauma. Some were clean lines from energy weapons, others were rough gouges that could only have come from claws or blades. 3 circular marks on her left side showed where something had burned completely through her body. "These," Sarah said quietly, "are what we call advantages." Admiral Veltar stared in shock. His 4 arms fell to his sides as he tried to process what he was seeing. "What? How are you still alive?" Sarah pulled her shirt back down, her expression calm. "That, Admiral, is exactly why you shouldn't underestimate humans. We don't look dangerous because we don't need to. We learn to survive by being tougher than we appear. Those wounds..." Captain Silwen's voice was barely a whisper. "Any one of them should have been fatal." "They were meant to be," Sarah said simply. "The question is whether you want to hear how I got them, or if you'd prefer to keep believing humans are too soft for real warfare." Lieutenant Kexra leaned forward, his tentacles writhing with curiosity. "Commander, that scarring pattern, it looks like you survived direct combat with Horde warriors." Sarah nodded. 3 of them, actually, in close quarters without backup, after my ship was destroyed. The room erupted in disbelief. General Thakran's eyes widened. "Impossible. No being survives hand-to-hand combat with the Crimson Horde. Their warriors are bred for killing." "Yet here I am," Sarah said. Admiral Veltar struggled to regain his composure. "Even if what you say is true, one fortunate encounter does not..." "It wasn't an encounter," Sarah interrupted. "It was a 36-hour running battle across an asteroid mining station, and it wasn't fortunate." It was Tuesday. The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. Finally, Captain Silwen spoke. "Commander, if you have experience fighting the Horde, why did you not mention this immediately?" Sarah looked directly at Admiral Veltar. "Because the Admiral made it clear he wasn't interested in listening to anything I had to say. He'd already decided humans were worthless before I walked into this room." Veltar's skin had returned to its normal blue, but his expression remained troubled. "You must understand, Commander, that what you claim seems impossible. The Crimson Horde has never been defeated in personal combat by any species." "Maybe that's because other species fight them the way they expect to be fought," Sarah suggested. "Big, strong, direct confrontation. Sometimes the best way to win is to be what your enemy isn't prepared for." "And what is that?" Veltar asked, despite himself becoming intrigued. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Unpredictable, adaptive, and absolutely unwilling to quit. "Admiral, you said humans have no natural weapons? You're wrong. Our greatest weapon is that we never know when we're beaten." General Thakran leaned forward. "Tell us of this battle, human. How does one small warrior survive against 3 Horde killers?" "The same way one small fleet might survive against an entire Horde armada," Sarah replied. "By being smarter, faster, and more determined than anyone expects." Admiral Veltar found himself genuinely curious for the first time since the meeting began. "Very well, Commander Chen. You have our attention. Tell us how you acquired those scars." "And more importantly," added Captain Silwen, "tell us what you learned that might help us save the Altair system." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down. "It starts with understanding something about the Horde that your intelligence reports missed. They're not just warriors. They're hunters, and hunters always have blind spots." The holographic display flickered as Sarah began accessing different data streams. "Admiral, you said their quantum communication is instantaneous and their discipline absolute. But what if I told you that absolute discipline can become a fatal weakness?" Veltar's head tentacles curled with interest. "Continue." "Give me access to your full tactical database," Sarah said. "And I'll show you how 100 human ships can do what 6 fleets couldn't." The room buzzed with conversation as the implications of her words sank in. Admiral Veltar found himself looking at this small human with entirely new eyes. Perhaps there was more to these creatures than he had assumed. "Very well," he said finally. "Authorization granted. But Commander Chen, if you are wrong, those scars will be the least of your worries." Sarah's smile was grim. "Admiral, if I'm wrong, none of us will live long enough to worry about anything." The tactical database hummed to life around them as Sarah accessed the Alliance's most classified intelligence files. Admiral Veltar watched her work, noting how quickly her fingers moved across the holographic interface. For a species supposedly new to advanced technology, she showed remarkable familiarity with the systems. "The Horde attacked mining station Omega-7 14 months ago," Sarah began, pulling up stellar charts. "It was supposed to be a routine patrol. My ship, the UES Defiant, was part of a 3-vessel reconnaissance group." The hologram shifted to show a massive asteroid, honeycombed with tunnels and processing facilities. "Omega-7 was one of our outer colonies. Population about 8,000, mostly miners and their families. Intelligence said the area was clear, but intelligence was wrong." General Thokran grunted. "Intelligence is always wrong when it comes to the Horde. They appear like ghosts." "Not ghosts," Sarah corrected. "They're actually quite predictable once you understand their hunting patterns." "But I didn't know that yet." She manipulated the display to show ship positions. "We dropped out of hyperspace right into their trap. 7 Horde vessels, including 2 heavy cruisers. My ship lasted about 90 seconds. Captain Silwen's form flickered with surprise. "You survived a ship destruction?" "Barely. The Defiant's bridge took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. I was thrown into the emergency pod system during the explosion. Most of my crew wasn't so lucky." Sarah's voice remained steady, but her eyes grew distant. "The pod systems automatically launched survivors toward the mining station. I was unconscious for most of the flight." Admiral Veltar studied the tactical display. "The Horde would have followed the escape pods. Standard procedure for them is to eliminate all witnesses. They did follow. But the station's defense grid bought me time to crash land in the lower mining levels. When I came to, half the station was already burning." The hologram shifted again, showing the internal structure of the mining station. Sarah highlighted a section deep in the asteroid's core. "I found myself in Tunnel Complex 7, about 3 kilometers from the main habitation areas. My survival suit was damaged, I had a concussion, and my left arm was broken. Oh, and the Horde had just landed boarding parties." Lieutenant Kexra leaned forward. "What were your orders in such a situation?" "Survive and report back," Sarah said simply. "But 8,000 civilians were trapped up there. Orders seemed less important than doing something useful." "So you went toward the enemy instead of away from them," General Thokran said, his voice carrying a note of approval. "I went toward the civilians. The enemy just happened to be in the way." Sarah pulled up internal station schematics. The Horde had landed 3 boarding teams. Each team had between 8 and 12 warriors. Their standard tactic is to move methodically through inhabited areas, killing everyone they find. Admiral Veltar studied the display. Standard anti-boarding protocols would have sealed the main sections and called for evacuation. The evacuation systems were destroyed in the first attack, and the Horde had brought boarding cutters. They could slice through blast doors faster than the civilians could retreat. Sarah marked several locations on the map. "I realized the only chance was to slow them down long enough for people to reach the deep emergency shelters." "How does one human slow down 36 Horde warriors?" Captain Silwen asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "By being somewhere they don't expect, and doing things they don't understand. See, Horde warriors are bred for direct confrontation. They're stronger, faster, and tougher than almost any species in the galaxy. But they're not creative thinkers." She highlighted a series of maintenance tunnels that ran parallel to the main corridors. "I spent the first few hours learning the station layout. Mining operations create complex tunnel networks, and humans are good at thinking in 3 dimensions. Most species move horizontally. Humans climb. You use the vertical spaces, Veltar observed. Among other things. My first contact with the Horde was Team Alpha. They were moving toward the school complex, 300 kids trapped in there. The hologram showed a large chamber deep in the asteroid. I rigged an explosive in the tunnel ahead of them, then dropped down from an overhead maintenance shaft behind their rear guard. The assembled military leaders watched as Sarah recreated her movements on the tactical display. It looked impossible. One small figure moving against a group of dots representing warriors twice her size. The rear guard was a single warrior. Horde doctrine puts their weakest fighters at the back because they never expect attacks from behind. I dropped onto his shoulders and used my plasma cutter to sever his neck cables. General Thokran's eyes widened. You killed a Horde warrior in hand-to-hand combat. I killed a Horde warrior by not fighting fair, Sarah corrected. He never saw me coming, and I hit his weak point before he could react. But the death scream alerted the rest of the team. The tactical display showed the Horde formation wheeling around to pursue a single target. Now I had 11 very angry warriors chasing me through tunnels I knew better than they did. The trick was making them follow me instead of continuing toward the civilians. How? Admiral Veltar asked, genuinely curious. I made it personal. Horde psychology is all about dominance and pride. I taunted them over their comm systems, told them they were cowards for attacking children. I used their fallen comrade's weapon to take potshots at them from hidden positions. Sarah traced her route through the tunnels. Basically, I made myself the most annoying target they'd ever encountered. Captain Silwen's form shimmered. That seems extremely dangerous. It was suicide, Sarah admitted, but it was working. They abandoned their advance and committed the entire team to hunting me down. That gave the civilians time to reach the deep shelters. The chase route on the display looked like a three-dimensional maze. Sarah had led the warriors up and down through the asteroid's core, using maintenance shafts, emergency passages, and mining equipment to stay ahead of her pursuers. This continued for 6 hours, she explained. I was running out of ammunition, my broken arm was getting worse, and the warriors were getting smarter about predicting my movements. That's when I made my first mistake. What mistake? Lieutenant Kexra asked. I underestimated how fast they could cut through a supposedly secure blast door. I ducked into what I thought was a safe room to treat my arm, and suddenly I had 3 warriors coming through the wall like it was paper. Admiral Veltar leaned forward. That's where you received the scars. The first set, Sarah confirmed. The lead warrior caught me with his claws across the ribs as I tried to roll away from his charge. Those gouges you saw, that was him trying to disembowel me with a casual swipe. She touched her left side unconsciously. But here's the thing about humans that other species don't understand. Pain doesn't stop us the way it stops others. It makes us angry. Angry? General Thokran asked. Furious. That warrior had just ruined my favorite jacket, and I was already having a really bad day. Sarah's expression grew hard. I had 1 plasma grenade left. I let him get close enough to grab me, then triggered it while we were in contact. The room fell silent. Even General Thokran looked shocked. You detonated a plasma grenade while in physical contact with the target? Took his arm off and put me in a medical coma for 3 days. But it also brought down half the ceiling, which trapped the other 2 warriors long enough for me to crawl away through a ventilation shaft. Captain Silwen's voice was barely audible. How did you survive a plasma detonation at point-blank range? Human bones are denser than most species realize, and our muscle tissue has unusual electromagnetic properties. I should have died, but humans are notoriously hard to kill when we're properly motivated. Admiral Veltar studied the medical readings that appeared on the display. The trauma indicators show massive internal damage. Your lung was collapsed, several ribs were fractured, and you suffered third-degree burns across 40% of your torso. Like I said, it was Tuesday. Tuesdays are always rough. Sarah's attempt at humor fell flat in the stunned silence. But the explosion bought me time to reach the medical facility. Auto surgery kept me alive while I was unconscious. 3 days unconscious, Lieutenant Kexera observed. What happened during that time? Teams Beta and Gamma continued their advance. When I woke up, they had overrun the main habitation areas and were converging on the emergency shelters. 7,000 people were trapped, and I was the only thing standing between them and a massacre. The tactical display shifted to show the final phase of the battle. My medical readings showed I should have been dead. Multiple organ damage, massive blood loss, and enough painkillers in my system to drop a Brutari general. But the civilians were counting on me. What could you possibly do in that condition? Admiral Veltar asked. Something the Horde would never expect. I stopped running and started hunting them instead. Sarah highlighted new positions on the map. See, the warriors had spread out to cover more ground. Instead of facing 23 enemies as a group, I was facing small teams of 2 or 3 scattered across multiple levels. You picked them off individually, General Thakran said with growing respect. I used everything I'd learned about the station against them. Emergency systems, mining equipment, even the artificial gravity generators. Humans are good at improvising weapons from whatever's available. The display showed a series of encounters, each one highlighting Sarah's tactical choices. I collapsed a tunnel on Team Beta using mining charges, turned the atmospheric processors against Team Gamma. Hard to fight when you can't breathe. The individual warriors I picked off using maintenance robots and jury-rigged explosives. Admiral Veltar watched the tactical progression with fascination. This is not standard military doctrine for any species. Because most species fight the way they were trained. Humans fight the way they need to fight. Sarah pulled up the final encounter locations. But even with advantages, I was losing. The remaining warriors adapted to my tactics and started working together again. I was down to 3 grenades and a plasma cutter when I faced the last group. How many? Captain Silwyn asked. 7 warriors, including 2 clan leaders. They'd figured out my patterns and cornered me in the central processing facility. No escape routes, no improvised weapons, no clever tricks left. The tactical display showed a large chamber with minimal cover. This is where I got the burn marks on my left side. Plasma rifle, close range. The shot went completely through my body. That should have been instantly fatal, Lieutenant Kexera said. It was meant to be, but the shot cauterized the wound as it passed through, which actually saved my life. And the warrior who fired it made the mistake of getting close to confirm the kill. Sarah's smile was predatory. I grabbed his rifle as he leaned over me and used it to kill 2 of his companions. Then I triggered the emergency venting system for the entire facility. Emergency venting? Admiral Veltar asked. Explosive decompression. Blew the entire processing center open to space. The warriors were caught in the blast zone, but I was protected behind a support beam. When rescue teams found me 6 hours later, I was unconscious in a survival bubble with 7 dead Horde warriors around me. The room remained silent for several moments as the assembled leaders processed this account. Finally, General Thakran spoke. Commander, your battle record shows remarkable tactical thinking under extreme conditions. But I must ask, how much of this was skill and how much was luck? About 50-50, Sarah admitted honestly. But here's what I learned that's important for our current situation. The Horde's greatest strength, their absolute discipline and coordinated tactics, is also their greatest weakness. Admiral Veltar leaned forward. Explain. They train for thousands of scenarios, but they all follow the same basic pattern, overwhelming force applied systematically. They don't improvise well, and they don't handle unexpected tactics gracefully. Their quantum communication network ensures perfect coordination, but it also means they all respond to threats the same way. Sarah activated a new section of the tactical display. Every engagement I had with them followed a pattern: initial contact, assessment of enemy strength, deployment of appropriate countermeasures. They're like a very sophisticated computer program, extremely effective, but predictable if you understand the code. And you believe this weakness can be exploited in fleet combat? Captain Silwen asked. I believe it's the only way to win. Sarah pulled up the current Horde fleet formation. Look at their positioning. Perfect sphere, optimal firing angles, coordinated advance. It's exactly what their doctrine calls for against a conventionally organized defense. Admiral Veltar studied the display. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give them something their doctrine doesn't account for, something no military manual in the galaxy has ever described. Sarah's eyes gleamed with the same intensity they'd held in the mining station tunnels. We're going to be human. Meaning what, exactly? Lieutenant Kexra asked. Sarah began manipulating the fleet positions on the display. Meaning we're going to break every rule of civilized warfare, use tactics that make no sense by conventional standards, and be so unpredictable that their perfect coordination becomes a liability. The tactical changes she was showing looked insane to the assembled military leaders. Ships in impossible positions, movements that violated basic strategic principles, a battle plan that seemed designed to ensure maximum casualties on both sides. Commander, Admiral Veltar said slowly, this appears to be a suicide mission. No, Admiral, Sarah replied. This appears to be a suicide mission. That's what makes it brilliant. The Horde will never see it coming because no rational military force would attempt it. General Thakaran's laugh rumbled through the chamber. I like this human. She thinks like a berserker. Not a berserker, Sarah corrected. Berserkers attack without thinking. This is calculated chaos, controlled insanity with a specific purpose. Admiral Veltar found himself genuinely intrigued despite his reservations. Very well, Commander Chen. Show us how human tactical thinking would approach this battle. Sarah cracked her knuckles and dove into the tactical interface with renewed energy. First, we're going to split our forces in ways that violate every principle of fleet concentration. Then we're going to attack from directions that are mathematically impossible. And finally, we're going to make the Horde's perfect communication network work against them. How? Captain Silwen asked. By feeding them so much contradictory information that their coordination protocols collapse. Admiral, you said their discipline is absolute? We're going to use that discipline to destroy them. As Sarah began outlining her plan in detail, Admiral Veltar realized he was looking at something unprecedented, a tactical approach that was simultaneously brilliant and completely insane. The small human with the terrible scars was proposing to save the galaxy by being more human than any alien could understand. 18 hours before the Crimson Horde would reach the Altair system, Admiral Veltar stood in the command center watching the most unconventional battle formation in galactic history take shape. Human ships moved through space in patterns that made his tactical computer issue warning signals every 30 seconds. Commander Chen, he said through the comm system, your vessels are violating minimum safe distances, optimal firing solutions, and basic principles of mutual support. Are you certain this will work? Sarah's voice crackled back with what sounded suspiciously like laughter. Admiral, if I was certain, it wouldn't be a human plan. We specialize in making things work that shouldn't work. Lieutenant Kexra approached with the latest intelligence reports. Admiral, the Horde fleet has increased speed. They will arrive 6 hours ahead of schedule. Veltar felt his stomach tighten. Signal all ships to adjust their positions accordingly. Already done, came Sarah's voice. We've been tracking their acceleration curve for the past hour. Human ships are moving to intercept at the new coordinates. How did you know they would accelerate? Admiral Veltar asked. Because it's what I would do in their position. The Horde scouts reported our unusual formation. Their commanders are probably confused and want to engage before we can reorganize into something that makes sense. Captain Silwen's ethereal form materialized beside the tactical display. Commander, your plan requires precise timing. If the horde arrives early, then we improvise, Sarah interrupted. Admiral, you're about to learn the most important lesson about human military doctrine. No plan survives contact with the enemy, so we make our plans flexible enough to survive anything. The next few hours passed in tense preparation. The human fleet scattered across 3 star systems in a formation that looked more like a random collection of lost ships than a military force. Meanwhile, the Alliance main fleet took position in what appeared to be a standard defensive formation around Altair Prime. General Thokran's voice boomed across the command frequency. "Human Commander, my warriors grow restless. When do we begin the glorious battle?" "When the Horde tells us to," Sarah replied calmly. "Remember, General, your job is to look as threatening and conventional as possible. Make them think you're the real threat." "I am the real threat," Thokran protested. "Of course you are. That's why this plan will work." Admiral Veltar found himself oddly calm despite the approaching battle. There was something infectious about Sarah's confidence, a certainty that defied logical analysis. "Commander, I must admit I still do not fully understand your tactical approach." "That's okay, Admiral. Neither do I, completely. Human tactics work best when they surprise the person using them as much as the enemy." "That sounds terrifying." "It absolutely is. But it's also effective." The Horde fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where Sarah had predicted they would, forming their characteristic sphere formation as they approached the Altair system. From the command center, Admiral Veltar watched 700 enemy vessels arrange themselves in perfect geometric patterns. "Magnificent," he murmured. "Terrible, but magnificent." "They really are impressive," Sarah agreed over the comm. "Look at that formation discipline. Every ship exactly where it's supposed to be, optimal firing solutions across the entire fleet, perfect mutual support angles." "You sound like you admire them." "I do admire them. They're probably the most effective military force in galactic history, which is exactly why they're about to lose." The Horde fleet advanced methodically, their massive dreadnoughts at the center of the formation surrounded by concentric spheres of smaller vessels. It looked like an unstoppable wall of death rolling through space. "Alliance fleet. This is Warlord Kreshak of the Crimson Horde," came a transmission on all frequencies. "You will surrender your worlds and submit to incorporation into our empire. Resistance will result in the complete annihilation of your species." Admiral Veltar activated his response system. "Warlord Kreshak, this is Admiral Veltar of the Galactic Alliance Defense Fleet. We reject your demands and will defend our territory." "So be it. Begin the attack." The Horde fleet accelerated toward the Alliance defensive formation around Altair Prime. Their approach was textbook perfect, a coordinated advance that would bring overwhelming firepower to bear on the defenders while maintaining optimal defensive positioning. "All ships, engage the enemy," Admiral Veltar commanded. The first phase of the battle unfolded exactly as every military manual predicted. The Alliance fleet, with General Thokran's Brutari ships in the lead, met the Horde advance with massed firepower and disciplined tactics. For 20 minutes, it looked like a conventional fleet engagement where superior numbers would inevitably triumph. "Horde fleet maintaining formation integrity," Lieutenant Kexra reported. "Their advance is proceeding according to standard doctrine." "Perfect," Sarah's voice said. "Right on schedule. All human vessels implement Phase 1. That's when the battle became something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Human ships that had been scattered across 3 systems suddenly appeared at impossible angles, emerging from behind asteroids, gas clouds, and even the gravity shadows of planets. But instead of attacking in coordinated formations, each ship seemed to be operating independently, striking at random targets with no apparent tactical coordination. "What are they doing?" Captain Silwen asked in bewilderment. Admiral Veltar watched the tactical display with growing amazement. "They're attacking from 17 different vectors simultaneously," No military force deploys like that. Exactly, Sarah replied. The Horde's tactical computers are trying to analyze 17 separate engagements happening at once. Their coordination protocols are designed for unified threats, not chaos. The effect on the Horde formation was immediate and dramatic. Ships began turning to address threats from multiple directions, breaking the perfect spherical pattern for the first time in recorded history. Their quantum communication network, designed to coordinate responses to unified attacks, was struggling to process the seemingly random nature of the human assault. Horde fleet is fragmenting, Kexra reported with disbelief. Individual ship groups are breaking formation to pursue targets. Phase 2, Sarah announced. All human vessels, initiate the shell game. Now the human ships did something that violated every principle of space combat. They started running away. But not in retreat. Instead, each ship led its pursuers on a wild chase through the asteroid fields and debris clouds that littered the outer system. "They're fleeing," General Thakran declared. "No," Admiral Veltar said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "They're leading them into a maze." The Horde ships, bred for aggressive pursuit, followed their fleeing targets deeper into the complex terrain of the outer system. Their perfect formation was now completely destroyed as individual groups chased what appeared to be easy prey through increasingly treacherous space. "Commander Chen," Veltar said, "the enemy is pursuing your vessels into dangerous terrain." "I know. We picked that terrain specifically. Human pilots train in asteroid fields from the day they first touch a flight stick. We're comfortable in places that make other species nervous." As if to demonstrate her point, a human corvette executed a turn that took it between two asteroids with barely meters of clearance, while its Horde pursuers were forced to take a longer, safer route. The delay was only seconds, but those seconds accumulated as the chase continued deeper into the field. "The humans are gaining distance on their pursuers," Captain Silwen observed. "Not gaining distance," Sarah corrected. "Controlling distance. We're staying exactly far enough ahead to keep them chasing us without letting them break off and return to formation." Admiral Veltar began to see the genius of the plan. "You're herding them." "Like sheep. Very large, heavily armed sheep, but sheep nonetheless." The third phase began when the scattered Horde ships found themselves in carefully prepared kill zones throughout the outer system. Human vessels that had seemed to be fleeing in panic suddenly revealed themselves to be luring their pursuers into crossfires established by other human ships. But even then, the attacks didn't follow conventional patterns. Instead of massed firepower designed to destroy enemy vessels, the humans targeted specific subsystems, communication arrays, navigation sensors, and coordination computers. "They're not trying to kill them," Veltar realized. "They're trying to blind them." "Right again, Admiral. Dead ships can't learn from their mistakes. Confused ships make bigger mistakes." As Horde vessels lost communication with their fleet command, their response became increasingly erratic. Ships that had operated with perfect coordination for thousands of years suddenly found themselves isolated and uncertain, forced to make individual decisions without the guidance of their quantum network. "The enemy is requesting new orders," Lieutenant Kexra reported. "But their communication grid has been systematically degraded. Many ships cannot receive coherent instructions." "Phase 4, Sarah announced. "Time for the magic trick." This was when Admiral Veltar witnessed something that would be talked about in military academies for centuries. The scattered human ships suddenly regrouped, not into the conventional formations favored by every other species, but into something that looked like controlled chaos. "They're forming attack waves," Captain Silwen said, "but the configuration makes no sense." "It makes perfect human sense," Veltar replied, finally understanding. "They're creating multiple threats that require different responses, but coordinating them in ways the Horde can't predict." The first wave consisted of fast corvettes that struck at Horde flagships with hit-and-run attacks designed to disrupt command functions. The second wave was heavy cruisers that engaged multiple targets simultaneously, forcing the enemy to divide their attention. The third wave was something unprecedented. Human ships working in pairs to create crossfire patterns that no defensive doctrine accounted for. How are they coordinating without quantum communication? General Thok-Ron demanded. They're not, Sarah explained. Each human captain is making independent decisions based on general guidelines and their own tactical assessment. It's called initiative, and it's something the Horde has never encountered before. The effect was devastating. The Crimson Horde, bred for thousands of years to operate as a unified entity, couldn't adapt to fighting an enemy that refused to be unified. Their tactical responses, perfect for conventional warfare, were useless against an opponent that seemed to change strategy every few minutes. The enemy is attempting to reform their sphere formation, Kexra reported. Too late, Sarah said with satisfaction. Admiral, this is where the Alliance fleet joins the party. Hit them while they're trying to reorganize. General Thok-Ron's battle cry echoed across all frequencies as the Brutari fleet charged into the confused Horde formation. Captain Silwen's vessels struck from another angle, their energy weapons cutting through ships that were still trying to coordinate their defenses. Admiral Veltar's own fleet delivered the decisive blow, catching the Horde dreadnoughts while they were separated from their escort vessels. The massive ships, designed to be protected by their formation, found themselves isolated and vulnerable. Warlord Kreshak is requesting terms of surrender, Lieutenant Kexra announced with amazement. The bridge fell silent. In 3,000 years of galactic warfare, the Crimson Horde had never surrendered. They had conquered or died, but never yielded. Put him through, Admiral Veltar commanded. Admiral, came the Horde leader's voice, no longer filled with arrogant confidence. Your unconventional tactics have proven effective. We request terms of withdrawal. Commander Chen, Veltar said quietly. This is your victory. The terms are yours to dictate. Sarah's response surprised everyone. Warlord Kreshak, we accept your withdrawal from Alliance space. Take your ships and leave. But understand this. The galaxy has changed. There are new players in the game now, and we don't play by the old rules. We understand, Kreshak replied. The humans fight with methods we do not comprehend. We will inform the Horde Council of this new threat. Not threat, Sarah corrected. Challenge. Come back when you've learned to think outside your sphere formations. As the Horde fleet limped away from Altair, their perfect formations now ragged and broken, Admiral Veltar found himself looking at the tactical displays with new eyes. The humans had achieved the impossible, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through sheer unpredictability. Commander Chen, he said formally, please report to the command center for debriefing. 20 minutes later, Sarah walked onto the bridge with the same casual confidence she'd shown during that first meeting. But now Admiral Veltar saw her differently. The scars hidden beneath her uniform weren't marks of weakness. They were credentials. Commander, he said, extending all 4 arms in the Zephyrian gesture of deep respect. I owe you an apology. I judged your species by your appearance and assumed weakness where I should have recognized strength. Sarah accepted the gesture gracefully. No apology necessary, Admiral. You couldn't have known what humans were capable of because we'd never had the chance to show you. General Thok-Ron stepped forward. Human warrior, the Brutari Empire requests the honor of learning your battle techniques. Your methods bring victory through courage and cunning. And the ethereal collective would be honored to study human tactical philosophy, Captain Silwen added. Sarah smiled, but it was a tired expression. I appreciate the interest, but here's the thing about human tactics. They only work because they're human. Other species trying to copy our methods would just create chaos, without the underlying mindset to make chaos effective. Then how do we defend against future threats? Lieutenant Kexra asked. You don't defend against them, Sarah replied. You adapt to them. That's what humans do. We adapt. When faced with something that should destroy us, we find a way to make it work for us instead. Admiral Veltar activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Veltar. Today's victory belongs to our human allies, who showed us that strength comes not from size or weapons, but from the courage to be something your enemies cannot understand. The response from the fleet was immediate and enthusiastic. Ships that had dismissed the humans hours before were now calling for joint training exercises and tactical exchanges. Commander, Veltar said privately, I have a request. The Alliance Defense Council will want a full report on human military capabilities. Will your people be willing to share your knowledge? Sarah considered this carefully. We'll share what we can, Admiral. But understand that human military doctrine isn't something you can learn from a manual. It's something you have to live. We don't fight the way we do because of training. We fight this way because we're human. And what does it mean to be human in a military context? Sarah touched the place where her scars lay hidden beneath her uniform. It means that when the universe tells us something is impossible, our first instinct is to prove it wrong. When faced with overwhelming odds, we get creative. When everything goes according to plan, we get suspicious. Admiral Veltar laughed, the first genuine laughter he'd felt in years. You realize this changes everything? The balance of power, the nature of warfare, the entire structure of galactic politics? Probably, Sarah agreed. But change isn't necessarily bad. The galaxy has been fighting the same way for thousands of years. Maybe it's time for something new. As the human fleet began forming up for the return journey to Earth, Admiral Veltar found himself looking forward to the reports he would submit to Alliance Command. The galaxy had indeed gained a new power, but not in the way anyone expected. Commander Chen, he called, as she prepared to return to her ship. Yes, Admiral? Those scars you showed us, were they really from Tuesday? Sarah's grin was pure human mischief. Admiral? Every day is Tuesday when you're human. We specialize in turning bad days into good stories. As her transport carried her back to the UES Defiant, Admiral Veltar realized that the Galactic Alliance had just gained something more valuable than new ships or advanced weapons. They had gained partners who would never surrender, never retreat, and never fight the same battle twice. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.